This is Tim.
I'm Mulele.
And this is Critiquing Comics. Welcome to Critiquing Comics. This is Tim with Mulele in Tokyo. How you doing?
Good. And you?
Okay. I think the rainy season started today. According to the weather forecast, it's going to rain every day for a week. So,
yeah, looking forward to that since my main mode of transportation is bicycle.
Yeah. And I have to walk to work. There's no other way for me to get there. So it's not the best for me either.
Yeah.
Because my route to work goes perpendicular to the train line. So.
Oh, nice.
I mean, mostly I don't mind not having to ride the train to work, but in that sense, it's a bit of a problem when the weather's not good. Okay, so we've got two more comics. Getting to the end of our queue here, we really need people to send us more comics. First, let's talk about Bronze Age Boogie. Written by Stuart Moore and art by Alberto Ponticelli. Now, this comic is published by Ahoy Comics, which is a new publisher. And I was kind of interested in reading this because I've read another Ahoy book called The Wrong Earth, which Paul and I actually talked about on To the Bat Poles because it's kind of Batman related. So I was interested in seeing what this was going to be. And it's a really ambitious book. And I liked it for that, but I felt it had some problems. I mean, I'm not even sure what the elevator pitch for this is. It's so complicated. So it starts out, for the first few panels, there are these bizarre characters in 1975. A human who's some kind of a doctor, a female ape in a wheelchair who talks, and a golem, what was his name? Go-Go Golem, I think, wearing like these go-go boots. And apparently, as we find out through the first issue, there's a group of time-traveling apes who are, I guess, kind of based in 1975. And one of them, named Sniffer, got stranded 3,949 years earlier, which I did the math would be 1975 BC. And so in 1975 BC, there's a war going on, and we're focused on King Domnall Constantine and his daughter Britta Constantina. And Britta seems oddly well-versed in mid-70s pop culture. And apparently, it's not stated, but I guess we're meant to believe that Sniffer, since he came from 1975 AD, has taught her all this pop culture stuff. But she's like making references to Room 222, and she says, "Sit on it, Potsy," like she's the Fonz. And I felt like it was as if she had firsthand knowledge of 1975. Yeah. She just seemed a little too familiar with it. I mean, apparently she's never seen a TV. And there's this sort of gag about her dad making grammatical errors, which doesn't really work, I think, because the mistakes aren't egregious enough. They're just sort of annoying to people who are into language and unnoticeable to people who aren't. And anyway, yeah, I mean, that gag really needed to be amped up to work. So we get to kind of these things sort of explained, and then Sniffer gives Britta this little disco ball on a string, and just then Martians attack. And Sniffer is the only one who recognizes them as Martians. And then the ball and Britta start glowing, and she finds herself in 1975 AD, where there are also Martians attacking. And that's, I think, that was the end of the first issue. And So in 1975, she meets Linda Dark and Jackson Lee, who are obviously Pam Grier and Bruce Lee, and they're fighting the Martians. And Britta has no linguistic difficulty. She's able to converse with them in English, which is never explained. And yeah, so my first question was, who's the audience for this? Because, I mean, if it came out in 1975 AD, the 70s cultural references would have some appeal, and everybody would say, oh yeah, I recognize this, and it's kind of interfacing with this earlier time. But now that's 44 years ago. Mm-hmm. And if you're much younger than us, or at least me, you're not even going to get these 1975 cultural references. Mm. So, a younger audience is just going to scratch their heads at this, I would think. Also, both issues that we were sent have like a page where it suddenly turns to a prose format, which, I mean, they're both kind of like storytelling scenes, but I didn't really, like, to me, that's just death for a comic, because it suddenly slows down the pace of your reading, and you're not finishing it at the rate you expected to, and to me, it's just annoying. But overall, I just felt like there were kind of too many ideas going on, and it was kind of lacked focus a little bit. I don't know. What did you think of it?
Well, first I gotta say that the jokes about her father's grammar, I actually laughed out loud when I saw the first one, because the father says, "Return to the hell from which you were birthed from." And I saw that and said, "Oh fuck, this is going to be one of those where the writer is not a native speaker, is it?" And then the panel, "Yep, that's my dad. Grammar was never his strong suit." That really worked, but it worked on me because sometimes we get comics that have grammar issues. And yeah, there were two of the gags, and I laughed at both of them. But it worked on me. But I think you're right. It doesn't necessarily work as a gag in its own right for someone who's not in our situation, where we're reading comics and citing all of these bad word choices or grammatical errors or errors or whatever. But also, we're English teachers by occupation, or we have been for much of our time in Japan, or at least I have.
Yeah, me too.
Well, but you
not exclusively English teaching, but even when I was doing other work, I was teaching English on the side.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. But basically, yeah, I don't think the jokes work generally, but they made me laugh. The Valley Girl, daughter of a barbarian who is fighting against zombies on the back, riding the backs of zombie dinosaurs. Yeah, that whole situation makes really no sense to me. And I read 1.5 issues, or one and 1.25 issues. I hit the 30-page limit and dipped. It was more of a time constraint than anything else. But I would have to say that there's a lot of fun and a lot of epic scene building. The world building here is totally reliant on the artist, who really pushes the battles and the backgrounds to just gorgeous heights. I was really impressed with the art. Sometimes there's a little bit of a wonky face here and there, but for the most part, the artwork is really, really solid. The colors are on point, even if they're a little flat during some of the talky bits. But the the writing seems to be just a little bit off. The idea that she would become this 70s pop culture meme machine from a talking monkey who is just telling her about it, even though he himself does not use those pop culture references in his basic language, seems weird to me.
Yes.
She should have grown up in the 70s, been transported back, and then is kind of dealing with it. And she was adopted into the tribe. That would make more sense.
That was what I thought was going to happen. But I was like, what? Really? She's never been in the 70s before?
Yeah. And so, that blows the concept for me, really. It just doesn't work. Then before we even make any headway into what they're doing and why they're doing it, and a little bit of mystery that they've set up about the magical place that's being protected by the wizards, or the wizards are drawing their power from the protected place, we suddenly get transplanted in a different time zone for the next issue. And yeah, I see that they're going for something, but the problem that I have is that if you're paying $4 an issue, how many times are you going to put that money out before you get that kernel of, oh, this is what it's about? And so I think you're right. In the elevator pitch, there's something you can't make an elevator pitch for the first issue. It's all set up. But the setup itself is just set up, and it doesn't actually hint at where it's going. So yeah, it has some problems there. The bit where they suddenly switch to prose in the first issue is just out of the blue, and I'm just like, what the fuck is this lazy shit? This is not comics. And in the second issue, they actually refer to it as story time, and which is a little bit smarter. But do you remember Shaolin Cowboy by Jeff Darrow?
Oh, I mean, I know the name. I'm not sure I ever read it.
All right. Well, Jeff Darrow used to do this comic, or he still does this comic called Shaolin Cowboy, and the Wachowskis were producing it at first. It's now under Dark Horse. But when the Wachowskis were producing it, they would write this long-ass dialogue on the first page. So the main character, he doesn't talk, but the donkey that he rides does talk. And because it's a donkey, the Wachowskis dubbed it the Assalogue. And so they had this like splash page of a donkey talking, and just like a wall of text in a word balloon. Worked much better than this does here. And even if they were to just limit it to the actual words that the monkey is speaking, it would have been better. But when we get to that first story, it says Sniffer Ape flashes a grin, settles himself on the floor of the tent, winces, and turns to pick a small insect off his ass. Now, this description is absolutely unnecessary to the comic itself. And you're right, it drags the shit down. It should be just the words. And all these descriptors and actions that are not happening in comic form but happening in prose form should be removed, at the very least. And if you're so hot to get this into the comic, then that shit that you put in should be really fucking good, and this is not. So yeah, it's an unnecessary bit of bullshit that they've put in, and it doesn't necessarily make me angry, but it makes me tired. And this is already after we've got a scene in a tent that lasts for like 10 pages. First, the girl, what's her name?
Britta, I think. Britta.
Is that short for Brittany? Is talking to her father for a couple of pages, and then the monkey wanders in, and she's talking to the monkey, and the monkey does story time, and then it ends, and then Martians attack. So yeah, it kind of doesn't work. Now, at the end, the comic, there's a letters page or something to that effect, and then there's another comic.
Yeah, there's a backup series going on here.
I dig the backup.
Yeah, me too. Let me check. Let's see. The credits way in the front of the book. That's called Major Ursa, written by Tyrone Finch and drawn by Mara Set. Yeah, that's a much more focused story.
Yeah, the artwork is cleaner. It's much more focused. They don't have a lot of time to fuck around, and they don't fuck around. They just get to it, and everything is well drawn, well timed, well executed, and everything is very clear.
I wonder if this Morissette artist might have some animation background. It looks kind of like that.
It does look like that a bit, but it's just the way everything kind of moves so smoothly. The design of the panel work and the layout of each panel is really sharp. And yeah, there does seem to be a little bit of an animation influence.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of bizarre to say buy this book to read the backup feature, but I feel like that's what we're doing.
Well, yeah, actually, I would say that's it, because I was really curious to see what would happen with the backup feature in the next issue, and it does continue in the next issue, which I'm very happy to say. But the main feature is a little bit too up its own ass, if I can put it delicately. Yeah.
By the way, just now, Major Ursa does have a quick elevator pitch, which I wrote up here. A bear is sent up in an experimental spaceship, is exposed to cosmic rays, and they make him intelligent and able to speak. And so then, what kind of political problems does that cause within the space organization and so forth?
Yeah. But they also set up a dynamic between the main scientist who's running the thing and her ex-husband, who's the pilot who believes that he should be in the space capsule, not the bear. And then when the bear comes back in the second issue, it seems that the bear is more intelligent than the ex-husband. And you also know from the first issue that the scientist has some strong feelings about the bear. And when she says he's more of a man than you'll ever be. So, I think we're walking the line of becoming a bestiality comic, but it's much more interesting. And can go a whole bunch of more interesting ways than the first comic, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would kind of like to see them flip it and have a Major Ursa book with the other as a backup.
Yeah.
That sounds so mean.
that does sound a little bit mean, but look.
Thanks for sending us your book. We like the backup.
Well, look. If you're gonna package yourself as a comic and then deliver us prose in the middle of the story, just for shits and giggles, I'm sorry. No, there's you're fucking around just a little bit too much. Just calm down and make your comic. Yeah.
Wayne, as far as the art,
I
mean, the backup is really good. Would you say that art-wise too, it's better than Bronze Age Boogie?
Yeah. Well, the art in Bronze Age Boogie is very spectacular, but like I said, there are a couple of bits where the faces are a little bit wonky. And the pen work and the economy of panel work in the backup it's just perfect. I mean, it's really fucking good.
Mm-hmm.
Like Steve Rude good.
Yeah.
So in that sense, there's not a single thing I can fault here. Not the story, not the pacing, not the panel work, not the panels themselves, not a single face, not a single background. There have been several panels where I just look at it and say, damn, that's just beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And simple panels too, like page 4, the bottom panel, the door of the elevator that they're walking out of is just that whole elevator.
Yeah. It's like
just
mesh doors and yeah.
But it's beautifully rendered.
Mm-hmm.
It's a simple thing that could be very easily fucked up. And I know because I've fucked up this kind of thing many times. But I look at this and say, man, it's just beautiful work. And the panel above that, where the bear is getting a little bit anxious in the cockpit, also beautiful work. That entire page is gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, there's nothing I can fault. And even the coloring is spot on. The coloring is gorgeous. So, yeah, for me, this is a perfect comic.
Yeah, I was really surprised. I mean, at first I didn't even notice it was there because I saw the credit for it at the beginning and like, what are you talking about? Because after the comic, there are pages of text.
Yeah.
But then I thought, well, I guess there are more pages, and I scrolled down. Oh, well, what do we have here?
Yeah.
So yeah.
I even love that on the last page 7, after the spaceship has crashed and the pilot is standing between his wife and the bear, he's got a tear in his pant leg, and below the belly you can see garters for holding up his socks.
Mm.
Yeah, that detail is just it tickles me. But it's I'm guessing this is from the 60s.
It has that kind of feel, yeah, like Moon Mission era.
Yeah, well, because she's kind of wearing a prom dress under her lab coat, and he's wearing garters. But yeah, that's a lovely comic with lovely art and a really nice story.
Yes, for sure.
Welcome to the Superman Fan Podcast. My name is Billy Hogan, and I will be your host. Before we begin our journey through the time barrier, please ensure that your red indestructible capes are securely fastened around your necks so that we may all travel safely into the past to explore the Silver Age adventures of the Man of Steel in the pages of Action Comics, Superman, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane, and World's Finest Comics. After we return from our journey, I encourage you to go to the website, thesupermanfanpodcast.blogspot.com. I look forward to have you join me each week to explore the Silver Age adventures of the Man of Steel.
Okay, now, would you believe, 10 years ago...
Has it been 10 years?
On Deconstructing Comics, before we'd even spun off as Critiquing Comics, we talked about a comic that was originally called Yon Kuma, and then eventually got changed to being called Bear Beater Bunyan, drawn by Jorge Munoz and written by, I can't remember how to pronounce his name, Josh Hechinger? Hechinger. Lots of different ways I could pronounce that. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so now, a few weeks ago, Mulele said, "Oh, there's a new comic. It's by the same two guys, and it's called, what is it called?
Longdog.
Longdog. I don't understand why it's called Longdog, but anyway. So yeah, how did he reach out to you, or how did you get this?
We follow each other on Instagram, and sometimes we just chat a bit. And every time he puts up artwork on his Instagram, I would encourage everybody to follow his Instagram because it is a lot of fun to look at. He puts up lots of like just random sketches and doodles, but they're really good. And they often kind of are on the side of Euro sci-fi comics, that kind of thing. There's a lot of Mobius inspiration and whatnot as well. Sometimes the work is really detailed, more detailed than the Longdog comic or Yonkuma, but every time he puts up one of these pictures, I'm like, dude, when's the next comic going to come? Because, he hasn't really made anything for years, or at least as far as I know. Maybe he's got a whole bunch of stuff that he's just not been sharing, but because I looked on his website and it says 10 years ago Josh and I put out Bear Beater Bunyan, and now we've got Longdog. So like nothing in between. I guess. And at one point I was thinking maybe to collab with him. And I would still like to do that. Just the project that I was working on didn't quite work out that way. So, man, if you're listening, I still got you in mind for something. So hang tight.
Actually, here under comics, I see there are some other things that were written by other writers and drawn by him.
He's been holding out.
So,
after hitting him up so many times, he finally said, "Hey, I've got a comic. Here it is." And he sent this a couple of weeks ago. It's ongoing, so there's more out than we've read. But yeah,
this seems to be kind of a serialized thing, because every few pages there was a title, header again, and sort of a summation of what happened previously.
Yeah.
But yeah. Basically, it's about looking for Bigfoot or Sasquatch, and they find him right away. So the thing, this is not exactly a spoiler, but the thing that bugged me about this, I felt like from the art and from some of the comments and narration and stuff, it felt like they were trying to have kind of a lighthearted feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody gets decapitated, and it's like, this is not lighthearted anymore. That kind of hurt the comic for me, because I felt like it wasn't staying kind of the same space that I thought it was trying to be. And it started out feeling like kind of like a Brian Lee O'Malley comic, but people usually don't get decapitated in Brian Lee O'Malley comics. But yeah, I think it's well done. Otherwise, certainly Jorge's a good artist. I don't know. How do you feel about this?
Okay, so on the art side, of course, I love his art style. This one's a little bit simpler than some of the artwork that he puts out, and I would like to see him one day do some whole hog science fiction heavy rendering stuff. That's my best want. But this is also quite good, and it's rendered in black and orange, and it's very reminiscent of a two-color Riso comic, which I think this would actually look really, really good as. If you're not familiar with Riso comics, they're kind of like glorified photocopiers, but you can overprint with them. Well, look it up. There are lots of good Riso artists online, and if you're down for indie comics, you'll know some of them, I'm sure. But I've worked in this myself, and I worked in blue and black, and really liked the result. and I've been kind of thinking about, well, what other colors can I really go with? And seeing this, it's kind of inspirational the way he worked the orange and the black, and of course white being the basic color of the paper. So that right off the bat, I really like. The subject matter, also liked it, a little bit fantastic. And as far as the comedy versus gory bit, it kind of lives in the realm of The Evil Dead Part 2 for me. Have you seen that film?
No, doesn't sound like something I would seek out.
Okay. Well, The Evil Dead Part 2 is kind of a university favorite film. Has been for, 30 years? Maybe a little bit longer. And is part of a trilogy. The first one is super serious, super boring, very, very hard to watch. The second one is an absolute insane comedy. And people basically don't need to see part 1. Just start with number 2 if you haven't seen it. And then it goes on to part 3, which, after the ending of part 2, you kind of want to see what's going to happen in part 3. But they do make a part 3, which is a little bit more high budget. Not as good as part 2, but also kind of a horror comedy. And so the idea of the characters being kind of two-dimensional and lightheartedly getting killed in graphic ways, I'm kind of used to that because I've seen it before. By the way, Tim, maybe you know The Evil Dead from that guy who has a chainsaw stuck to his arm instead of a hand. He's got one hand as a chainsaw, the other hand has a shotgun.
Okay, doesn't ring a bell. But
all right, he also had a TV show for 3 seasons, where 30 years after part 3, he comes back and tells more of the story. But anyway, it's a fantastic series. Recommend it to everyone. Not just the TV show, but start with Evil Dead Part 2 and go on from there. But anyway, it's early Sam Raimi, the guy who made Spider-Man, the first trilogy of Spider-Man movies. And so for this comic, I'm totally in that zone. And I can see the humor of it. And it kind of doesn't worry about the characters too much, but it has a bit of a simple premise, but the last page of what he sent us kind of made me feel like I wanted to read much more. So basically, they come to the point in the comic where they say, okay, this creature is a Wendigo. Basically, some creature that eats human flesh. And he explains that this was a regular man who, under some strange circumstance, had to eat the flesh of another person. Like maybe they got lost in the forest, his friend died, and to keep himself alive, he had to eat his friend. And when that happened, he turned into this creature. So this Sasquatch hunter decides that he is going to go kill the Wendigo and eat the Wendigo's flesh and see what happens. And I kind of want to see that. I kind of want to see what happens in that case.
Yeah, it kind of piques my curiosity too.
Yeah, so my curiosity is piqued with this, but like with the previous comic we were talking about,
Bronze Age Boogie.
Thank you. I'm not piqued.
No.
At all. I'm okay. It was funny in the beginning, confusing in the middle, and by the end it was like, no, I'm good. This one, a little bit rush start, but I had a couple of interesting shots, some nice artwork, and Jorge has had my attention for years. And so maybe I'm a little bit more willing to follow because I want to hear what he has to say. And so that's where I'm at with it. That I liked reading it. I thought the stuff with the guy typing into his social media, rip, hashtag rip Bobby, hashtag alive, hashtag Sasquatch is not lit. I quite like that. Yeah, I'm looking for more of the same. The only thing that I would say I would really like is for them to take a little bit more time with some of the scenes. That they could stretch this out a little bit more. Doesn't have to be quite so compact. Yeah.
Yeah, things did seem to happen a little quickly.
Yeah.
Really minor point, but the Sasquatch hunter, I couldn't understand how to pronounce his name. Bobisle. So it could be Bobisle, or it could be Bob Isle. Maybe it's Isle, Isle like island. And I'm kind of wondering where that name comes from, even.
Yeah, I had trouble with it at first, and then I felt maybe it was a play on imbecile.
Okay.
And it was actually Bobicil. Not that that means anything, but I mean, I mean, this guy does seem to be pretty dumb, and yeah.
Okay.
Or man, watch it be just an actual name that's near and dear to the comic. There's like, man, fuck you guys.
That was my grandmother's maiden name.
Yeah, right.
You can support this podcast by going to patreon.com/deconcomics. Pledge at least $4 a month and you can get extra content, including Tim Catches Up with the MCU, in which Mulele pesters me to watch all the Marvel movies I missed. Here's a sample of our talk about Captain America, the First Avenger. Let's see, let's talk about Bucky.
Yeah.
After he falls off that train down into the depths of the mountains, or wherever they were, I felt like the movie kind of moved on from that a little too quickly.
Well, Captain America was trying to deal with it by getting drunk, but couldn't.
Well, but yeah, that's true. They came back to that, but in between there was some other stuff that had nothing to do with Bucky, and I felt like they, right after he apparently died, they needed like another beat there to just sort of take it in, but it just like, okay, let's go on to the next thing. Yeah, and then they'd come back to his grief, but it didn't quite fit together right for me.
Yeah, I think that's it, actually. That's the part that is bugging me. Everything seems to kind of fit in the right place without actually earning it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, moving on a little too soon after Bucky's death, and not having Bucky's death really affect anything in the film. So basically, if Bucky were not even there, the only thing you would need is a different excuse for Captain America to kind of take it to the fight, to take the fight to the Red Skull.
You'll get that plus our Spider-Man 1963 series and more. Pledge at least $4 a month at patreon.com/deconcomics. We appreciate your support. Now back to the show. So, Mulele has a story to tell us. Our comics have story times, so we can have story times. This is all in prose. So,
yeah. So, a little bit of a winding story. So I'll try to make it brief. Hopefully this isn't too much inside baseball, but just to make sure it isn't, just we'll say that I often go to comic book expos and sell comics. I table at Comitia, and have tabled once or twice at Comiket, which is the big Tokyo convention that happens twice a year. Can usually only get in during summer. So there I am in the middle of August, sweating my ass off trying to hawk my comics, but haven't gone to Comiket in years. Haven't gone to many comitias in the past year. I think I've been to like 3 in the past year and a half.
Yeah, that's 4 times a year.
Yeah. And I'm thinking of maybe even stripping it down a little bit further. It's like when I've got a couple of new books, maybe I'll go out there and pump them. But anyway, that's a little bit of background. Now, the story starts in Kawasaki. Apparently, there was a guy who, and maybe this made the international news, I'm not sure, but it made...
Yeah, it was in the Washington Post. I saw it.
Okay, then yeah. The old man who went around stabbing kids and adults at this bus stop and then slit his own throat. No one knows why he did it, but 2 people died, plus the man killed himself. Tragic.
Yeah.
But apparently there's this guy who lives in Nerimaku, the ward where I live. Not necessarily my neighbor, but he lives in the same ward of Tokyo that I live in. So this man is a former member of the government. He was the
agriculture minister. Yeah, I do know what you're talking about here.
Yeah, and he was also the ambassador to like Norway or someplace at one. But anyway, the man is kind of up there in the government. He's retired now, but basically he has this son. The son was a little bit of a
like a recluse.
Yeah. Is it recluse or recluse?
I think as a noun, isn't it recluse? That's what I've always heard, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, I'm often wrong, so we'll just go with what you said. But anyway, he was kind of that. And he was married for a time, but he beat his wife. So they split, and he came back home. And apparently this guy is a graduate of Yoyogi Animation School.
The son.
Yeah, the son.
Yeah.
Yeah. The government employee, I don't know.
Not much of an animator.
Yeah, well, I don't know what his maybe he wasn't part of Yoyogi. Yoyogi is one of the famous schools of animation in Tokyo. I actually went to Tokyo Animator, which is the rival school of Yoyogi. But Yoyogi is a little bit more famous, a little bit more connected. So he's a bit of a comic book artist, the son is. And but he's something really surly. Apparently, once he moved back home, he often hit his mother and his father, the father being the government employee. So the story's a bit dark here in that there was a lot of father-mother abuse by the son, and he would smack them around like on the regular. But he would also make comics and then go to Comiket and sell them, which I did not know, and I'm actually kind of shocked that this situation went on while he was making comics. I don't know. I guess maybe I shouldn't be shocked because it's just something that happens. People do shit, and then people do other shit, and it's all whatever. But basically, there was a school festival next door at the elementary school, and the son was like, "Oh, these fucking kids are so loud. I should kill them all." And this Kawasaki thing that just happened, the father looked at that and said, "Oh, fuck, my son," and told him about it. It's like, "Look, you should never say that kind of shit." And of course, the son answered with his fist, started beating his father. And so the father's like, "Okay, I got to take care of this. This is not going to go well." And basically, one day while his wife was out and the son was asleep, he crept up on his son and stabbed him 12 times with a knife, ending his life. Now, of course, all this shit happened just a couple days ago, and it hit the newspaper. And of course, people knowing that this guy used to sell comics at Comic Kit commented that, the father was actually made the Uriko of the son. And Uriko is the sales girl, I guess is what they call it. But he was the person who would stand by the artist and just sell the comics. And I've actually asked my girlfriend to do that for me on many occasions. She doesn't like it because she thinks that, nerds smell bad. But, I don't quite hold that low opinion of people who are into comics because, I'm into comics myself. But she would just look at them and say, these fucking nerds, this is weird, they're whatever. And so, she hates it. But when she read the newspaper about this incident, apparently the other Comic Kit creators looked at the fact that he was a salesperson for his son's comics. They said, you should never force someone to be a seller for your table, a sales girl for your table, if they're not into comics. So that's like a major no-no. And so my girlfriend read that and said, okay, I quit. And in fact, she's asking me to retire from that side of my comic business. And, I don't necessarily think that she's right or wrong. It'll go whichever way it goes for what I need to achieve in my life. But anyway, the comic book connection I thought was a little bit weird but interesting.
By the way, I looked it up. So the father had been a bureaucrat in the agriculture ministry, not the agriculture minister, not the political appointee, but a bureaucrat. So,
but actually, just an odd connection. One of my former students was a member of the agriculture ministry. So probably not only worked with him, but knew him personally. Huh.
Wow.
I never thought about that. But anyway, neither here nor there. So story time is over. Thank you. Dark tale of peripherally connected comics and whoa.
Okay. Okay, so as I said, I'm going to have to talk to you off mic, but or off podcast, but we've got one submission left that it's debatable whether it's a comic or not. Maybe we could still talk about it, but we'll talk about that later. But otherwise, we have nothing. So please send us your comics. Send a PDF or a link to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read at least 30 pages of it and critique it on the show. So let me get this straight. We're begging for submissions, and then once the submissions come, we're going to be ruthless in our critiques about the quality of the comic. Yeah, that's true.
That is kind of our shtick, but sure. I mean, I should say that all of the shit that I talk about, all the comics that we review, is for the benefit of the creators.
Yeah, and 90% of the ones we hear back from, will appreciate the honest review. There'll be a few people who say, no, you don't get it, but most of them will, seem to appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, and actually, too, anybody that I have critiqued or that you feel, I've said something wrong about some person whose comic you liked, please at me. My Twitter is @Mulele Redux. I'm always open to chat about shit. I'll keep it civil. I'm not down for name calling or angry tweeting. I don't even drunk tweet anymore because that shit gets me in trouble. But if you want to talk about some comics, at me. If you want to talk about your comic, at me.
Yeah. Okay, and by the way, in case anyone wants to talk to me, I'm at Decon Comics on Twitter. So, we'll be back in a couple weeks with something or other. So, till then, this is Tim.
I'm Mulele.
And thanks for listening to Critiquing Comics. Next week on Deconstructing Comics, Kumar and I discuss Walt Simonson's 1980s run on Thor. And Mulele and I will be back in a couple of weeks with more critiques. So see you then.